Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Friday morning live here, coming to you live from Holding Hope Central in Battleground, Washington. My name is Mary Jad Wisiak, and I am so happy to be here with you today. It's Friday, and it's so happy it's Friday. I don't know about you, but I've really not had a very energetic week. I've kind of been running at 50% all week. So, oh my goodness, I'm so excited to talk to you today about strengths based, right? When we look at what so first of all, I want to give you a context of what we're doing here on this Friday morning lives. I've been doing these recordings for quite a while, and I recently decided to put a little structure around it to give myself more motivation to be here. And so what I'm doing is I'm talking to you each week about one module of our CARES toolkit. I don't know if you've seen the CARES toolkit, Essential Skills for Peer Supporters, but it is awesome. We have 12 different on-demand modules that you can access anytime. Each one is about an hour long. It's a conference that we recorded all of the webinars. We recorded it all. It was all online. Back before the pandemic, we were doing stuff online. So we recorded everything. And then with each module, also there's just a boatload of links and extra resources that you get, so that if you just are a little bit lacking in one area, you can go in there and you can really do a deep dive of training in that area. It's priced to sell. It's just my favorite thing that I've created in a really long time. And I created it in partnership with my good friend, Stephanie Lane. So between the two of us, it's a fantastic workshop, and they've got experts from all over the country that joined us for this conference that we recorded and that we recreated the toolkit from. So if you haven't checked it out, go to carestoolkit.com and check it out. So what I want to talk about today is strengths-based. It's one of those things that I've heard of for the entire time I've been in mental health and behavioral health services, is being strengths-based. I heard about it first when I was a mom with a young person in my life that had some emotional and behavioral issues, and being strengths-based came from wraparound programs that I had heard about as a parent. And so but then as we moved forward in our lives and I began to understand mental health, and I began to understand my own issues, and I began to understand what was happening in the government around me, I noticed that the SAMHSA guiding principles of recovery, one of those essential components of recovery, even before the principles, one of those components of recovery was being strengths-based. Now, it's interesting because for reasons that are obvious, and maybe not so obvious, when the government began to pay for services to help people get well, they had to be able to count them. They had to be able to figure out, what are we going to pay for? What are we not going to pay for? And so it began it followed a medical model, and there was insurance codes, and the DSM, whether you know it or not, was initially created by some white guys with shiny shoes in Washington as billing codes, so that the government would be able to track what is it that we're going to pay for and what aren't we going to pay for, and what are the things, like here's a diagnosis and here are the services that we're going to offer. So the DSM to me is a fantastic, it's an interesting cultural artifact, because it was a time in there when PMS was a mental illness, and there was a time in there when being gay was a mental illness. And so it's a really, I try not to take it too seriously, because what it was created for was billing codes. Well, we created this system based on what was wrong with you, because that's what we're going to pay for to provide you with the help. It's okay. It's a good place to start, but that's certainly not where we're going to stop. So the question became then, as people started to advocate for themselves, and as we began to get into the peer movement and the consumer survivor ex-patient movement, we began to hear things like, it's not what's wrong with you, it's what's strong within you. And then fantastic people like Brene Brown came forward and started talking about vulnerability as a strength. And if you think about it, oh my goodness. So what I really want to talk about today is Strengths from a place of our brokenness, because it is where we are broken that we align with each other. And often that's when that heals, that's our strongest spot. And so when we have these things that make us so that we're not in step with the rest of society, or we have some issues, or we have addictions, or we have substance use issues, or there's mental health issues, and we feel like there's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with me, and I am not going to be able to do this. And then we come along and we get a peer supporter who says to us, now, wait a minute, there's an awful lot that's strong with you. Or we get a therapist, or we get a receptionist, or we get anybody, or a family member, or a landlord, or anybody who comes into our life who's able to identify a strength in us. And what's the first thing that we do? You don't really know me. I'm really not well. I'm really not a very good person. I'm this, I'm that, or the other thing, right? Because we've internalized the broken pieces as opposed to the strong parts. The strong parts have never been accentuated, and sometimes in order to be able to get what we needed to survive, we've had to elevate the broken parts and diminish the strong parts in order to get qualified for the services that we needed to stay alive and get well. So it's hard to think about what's strong with you. The other piece that comes with strengths based is there's a learned dependence on the system. And because we're not quite in step with the rest of the society or whatever, we learn to depend on people, and we learn to doubt ourselves, and we learn to trust others. And so when we ask somebody to think about what their strengths are, we're putting responsibility back onto them. And oh my goodness, they might make a mistake, which of course is a fantastic thing to do. It's just nothing. You just don't learn anything other than like when you make a mistake. That's just the best learning ever. So the point is that there's a couple of things I want to make, is that our strength is in our brokenness. Our strength is in our vulnerability, our ability to say out loud, here's what I need. Here's what I've experienced. Here's what happens in my head. Here's what happens in my heart. Here are the compulsions and addictions I have. This is what I have. And I don't know what to do with this. And that's when we get lots of support and lots of help. So we have to get vulnerable before we get strong. And then we start to discover strengths in places we didn't know we had. We start to be able to create a life for ourselves that we never thought was possible. We start to be able to say, I'm not really good at that, but I'm going to try. And we develop new skills. But here's what we know about the way our brains work, is that if you don't know something and you work on it really hard, you're going to get better at it. If you know something a little, or you've experienced it and you work really hard at it, you're going to get a lot better, because our brain likes to build on knowledge that we've already had. So we suddenly find that we're experts in certain areas. And that's why many of us go into being a peer supporter, because we know that. We've got the lived experience in that. And that's why we can recognize the peers. We can recognize the strength in the peers that we serve, because we have it ourselves. You're not going to be able to recognize something in somebody else unless you have it, unless there's a part of you in there that says, I know what that is. I know what that is. I know where that comes from. I know how to support that. I know how to foster that. That's what we talk about when we're talking about peer support. So peer support comes from vulnerability and experience. That's where the strength comes from. We look at those two things and we say, these are supposed to be the two things that disqualify me from everything. I'm supposed to be badass. I'm supposed to be pulling myself up by my bootstraps. I'm supposed to be independent. I'm supposed to be self-supporting. I'm supposed to be all these things, and I'm not, right? But here's what I am. And I got this experience, and I do this, and I know how to love people, and I know how to stay well. I know when I'm not when what's going on in my brain is not the truth, right? Whether it's a compulsion to use, or whether it's a symptom of an illness, whatever it is, I know what I'm doing. And I can recognize in other people that they know what they're doing. and that they know what they need to keep doing and keep going. Oftentimes, people with clinical degrees are a fantastic resource and can help us create new tools and help us to create new insights. But it's up to us to pick up those tools and create new muscles and new strengths. And that's where peer supporters come in. I find that it is so awesome because peers can recognize a strength that other people in the agency might not see as a strength. They might think that a person is struggling, and a peer supporter can say, oh no, I know what that is. And we got to let this play out because this is going to result in some real growth and some real progress. We believe in each other. We believe in ourselves. We believe in each other. And that's where strength-based comes from. We get it from each other. It's not that we're just strong and independent and living here by ourselves in these little bubbles, even though it's COVID-19. These little bubbles that we have, they're temporary. It's breaking through those bubbles and connecting with other people that really create our strengths. And we know what that looks like. And we're willing to help other people do it. That's what strength-based is about. It's not about doing what you're supposed to do because you're supposed to do it and get some symptom management under control. It's about stepping out and saying, I don't think so. Right? This morning on my Facebook feed, I saw this song, and it was an Irish woman, and she was singing in this extraordinary voice about being her mother's savage daughter who walks barefoot and curses at the sharp stones. She's not going to cut her hair, and she's not going to lower her voice. And I love that. I loved that because that's how I feel. And when we step out as our mother's savage children and we take hold of who we are, and we are unapologetic in who we are and what we've learned and what we can offer, and we offer other people to recognize the strengths in themselves, that's when we get well. That's when we get our lives back, and our lives are shockingly wonderful. So that's today's Friday Morning Live. I hope you've enjoyed it. And you know what to do, right? Stay hopeful.